Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Geek-Stew, and today, guys, welcome back to Conspiracy Theories with Ike. That's right. Now, I might be joyous and excited in this intro, but I'm going to give you a forewarning right up front that today's video is going to talk about some very touchy subjects, including kidnapping and some material that may, for lack of a better phrase, be unsettling. So, I want to give that first and foremost. I probably already put in the video. Viewer discretion is advised. But today we are talking about another conspiracy theory from the conspiracy theory iceberg. This one is listed on the iceberg in the second tier as simply Tara Calico. Now, I want to go ahead and thank K1205 for the iceberg and for the content that is. And this specific theory is a very in-depth theory. So this one is talking about specifically the disappearance of Tara Calico. Now, we're going to get into the specifics and the details here in a moment, but I want to go ahead and forewarn you that this may be a longer video than most people are anticipating. However, I'm going to try and keep this as engaging as possible, and I'm going to move from everything as fluently and quickly as possible while still getting the content across that you need to know. This is a very in-depth topic, so I would definitely be prepared for the long haul here, but this is an active case that is still being investigated as we speak. And we'll get into that a little bit later, but that's part of the reason why this is important. But let's go ahead and jump into it. Let's talk about the disappearance of Tara Calico. Before we get into that, I do want to real quick say that I apologize if I'm mispronouncing any names. I tried to look at pronunciations when I could. However, if I am, for whatever reason, pronouncing something incorrectly, I'm just pronouncing it the way that I think it should be. So I do apologize if anything is being pronounced incorrectly, okay? With that out of the way, we need to talk about who is Tara Calico and what happened to her. So first and foremost, Tara Calico is an individual born in Belen, New Mexico, February 28th, 1969. They resided in Belen until 1988, when she was believed to have been kidnapped. Now, to kind of dive into that a little bit, the kidnapping it happened on September 20th, 1988, as mentioned. Calico was an avid bike rider. She used to ride along the New Mexico State Road 47. I've never been to New Mexico, so I couldn't honestly reference that for anybody, but I'm sure if you looked it up, find a map. She was riding around that area around approximately 9:30 for, again, her daily bike ride. I have a bike rider, and specifically, she was actually going to play tennis with her boyfriend. Calico actually told her mother that if she did not come home by noon, that she needed to come and get her. When Calico's mother went to go get her from playing tennis around this time frame, she was unable to find her after continued searches and along the trail that she thought that Calico may have been on. She was unfortunately unable to find her. At this juncture, she did then include the police. The police at that juncture started their investigation, and a couple of things happened at this point that caused alarm. Before we get into the question of what caused alarm for the situation, what led them to believe that this may have been a kidnapping or disappearance, one important factor that I wanted to note that I'm not sure if this has been noted before, but when I was doing research for this episode, Tara Calico's mother went on record at some juncture and said that she actually used to accompany Calico on bike rides. However, she declined doing so on this day as well as days around this time because she felt that she had been being stalked by somebody in a vehicle. So this is important because it's very relevant what's happening. Obviously, we're not sure if there's any correlation, but it's very interesting information to have to include in this section. That being said, it's also important to include that Calico's mother actually encouraged her to carry mace because of this event. Just keep that in mind. Now, on to the substance of the matter that kind of led the police to believe it may have been a kidnapping. They actually found a destroyed, was a Sony Walkman and a cassette tape of Calico's, specifically along the way that she had been riding her bike. Now, this is important because some believe that this was her trying to basically track her steps, right? She gets picked up, she breaks the cassette and everything else that's laying there, and that marks where she may have been taken. So that was believed to be possibly when and where she was taken. Now, again, there was not really anybody who officially said, yes, I saw her get taken. However, there are people who did report a vehicle that was following close behind. The vehicle was a light-colored pickup truck, possibly a 1953 Ford with a camper shell on it. Now, I'm adding pictures as we go along, but this is the closest picture I could find. I'm sure there may have been a closer picture. But in addition to that, they actually never found her bike. So it's very important to say that A, no one saw the abduction. B, they did say that they saw this vehicle following her closely. In addition to that, basically nothing material of hers ever, popped up outside of the broken Sony Walkman and the cassette tape that they found along the road. So this is important information because she basically up and vanished, and that was the end of it. There was a period of time where they did their standard investigation. I'm not really sure if it ever went to being an official cold case. However, I do know that from my research, Tara Calico, they continued to look for her. They tried to follow as many leads as they could. However, the initial investigation probably didn't turn up much because there wasn't much to turn up. Now, of course, there are a lot of unfortunate cases like this where basically person gets kidnapped and that's the end of it. And a lot of people thought that this was just going to be another case like that. However, there were some strange things that occurred after the fact that honestly, in my opinion, make me relate this case similar to that of Johnny Gosch's. If you've not checked that out, actually I have a video I made on Johnny Gosch, which you can watch. I'll link that below. However, the reason I say that is because there are some very strange things that happened after the fact of her being kidnapped, or allegedly kidnapped, that make me question what was happening and what exactly happened to Tara Calico. Thing about this case is that there were a number of photographs, Polaroid photographs, that popped up after her disappearance that served as potential leads for the police. Now, there's one in particular that you may have actually seen before, and it's very, very interesting, and a lot of people have speculated on this photo. There has even been people who have tried to break down the photo to try and determine if this is in fact her. However, in June 15th, 1989, the first photo was that of two people being bound and gagged inside of a Toyota van. So the photo, again, has an unidentified woman and boy. There is actually a whole nother story with this that I'm not going to really get into, but the boy was potentially identified, and that's a whole nother track to follow. However, both the boy and the woman in the photo were both gagged with black duct tape and seemingly bound. Speculation says that they may not have been bound, and the photo may have been a gag. However, this was discovered in a parking lot of a convenience store in Port St. Joe, Florida. The photo was left behind in a parking spot. The parking spot had previously held a windowless white Toyota van that was previously parked there. Now, the people who identified the van also identified the driver. Now, the driver, they actually never confirmed who it was, and they also never actually found the van itself, but the witnesses did say that the person driving was a man with a mustache who appeared to be in his 30s. So the police set up roadblocks. Again, they never found the van. Nothing ever came from it. As for the photo, it was confirmed to have been taken after May of 1989. The reason they did this is that they talked to Polaroid officials and experts, and they can tell with the type of film that was being used when it was produced, and based on the production date of the film, they're able to determine when the photo was most likely taken after. With that being said, this is actually publicly broadcast on a show called A Current Affair in July of 1989. So shortly after the photo was discovered, it was put on it was called a public affair. A current affair. I've never actually heard of this TV show, but this is like the logo for it. And they showed the photograph on live television. And this is where it gets interesting. friends of the Calico family notified Tara Calico's mother, and basically they were like, wow, this looks like Tara. This could be her. So her mother was convinced. And now I want to emphasize that they use the word convinced. That means that there's some doubt that this was Calico, but the mother seemed convinced that it was in fact her. The reasons that she thought this was indeed Tara Calico are as follows. The woman in the photo has a scar that is identical to one that Tara had. Now, it's on her leg, I believe, and you can actually look that up. I wasn't able to find like a photo of her with, just generally speaking with the scar. However, they did say that the scar matched. In addition to that, next to Tara was a book called V.C. Andrews' My Sweet Audrina. That book apparently was one of Tara's favorites, and it seemed sort of too crazy of a coincidence for this person who looked like Tara to have Tara's favorite book and a scar that seemed to match what she also had. In addition to that, this photo was analyzed by many groups. Scotland Yard concluded that it was in fact her. They went as far to say that yes, we believe this is her. However, it was also now analyzed by the Los Alamos National Laboratory, which disagreed. And a third analysis was done by the FBI, saying that it was inconclusive. Basically, they didn't want to say yes or no. It could be her, it couldn't be her. Who knows? So this, of course, raised a lot of speculation as to whether or not this photograph was in fact Tara Calico. Basically, 3 different agencies from all over the world essentially came to 3 different conclusions. So it seems somewhat likely it could have been her, but it also seems as equally likely that it wasn't her. The mother seemed convinced, however, as we have learned from other cases similar to this, people will almost push hard for some form of hope in these situations. So it's hard to tell whether or not this is in fact Tara without, again, further, more conclusive evidence. Now, there were subsequent photos that were released, and I don't want to touch on this too much because these, of course, technically have no real correlation to Tara Calico. So basically what happened was that there were photos that were sent to a newspaper called The Star. The newspaper was in Porn State Joe, Florida, which was similar, the same place as the first photograph that showed the girl and the young boy being bound with black duct tape. And the photos were of a boy who looked very similar to the one in the initial photograph. Those photos then, of course, led people to believe that perhaps this had something to do with the Tara Calico disappearance. Now, in addition to this, around the same time that these photos came out in 2009, there was a self-proclaimed psychic whom I was not able to identify and or find pictures of, who said that she had met a runaway in California who she worked with at a strip club who was murdered. She said that she had dreams suggesting that that runaway was Tara Calico and that she may have been buried in California. However, there were searches done and this did not bring any additional discoveries. Despite those photographs basically having nothing to do with Tara Calico, there were actually other subsequent photographs that were confirmed to have been Tara Calico that were in fact released. The 2 photographs are a little bit more, I would say, disturbing in some ways, depending on how you want to perceive them. One of which has mostly been debunked as possibly just a gag of some sort where somebody was joking, and they're pretty sure it's not Tara Calico. The other one, it's inconclusive, unfortunately, because of how vague the picture is. But let's get into those 2 photos because those are also important pieces of this story. The first photo we're going to talk about is the vague photo. The vague photo is of someone who seems to have been bound in some way, shape, or form. I have it up on the screen. Now this one, of course, we're not really sure who this is, but this was also taken on Polaroid. Both of these were confirmed to have been taken on a Polaroid after, I believe, 1989. The important thing to remember about this photo is that no one really knows who this is. There's no one who ever came forth to claim this photo. And yeah, but we're not really sure who this is. It could have been Calico. You can see some vague identifying characteristics but unfortunately there's nothing identifying enough of these photos to for sure say that this is Calico. The other photo is almost certainly a gag. Calico's mother even went on to say that this photo was likely a joke, but maintained that the first one could be her, the first one that I showed you. The photo I'm going to show you now, it was taken on an Amtrak train, and it depicts a woman who could potentially look similar to that of Tara Calico, with a man who was holding her. Now, of course, a lot of people seem to think that this is a joke, including Tara Calico's mother, so I don't put a whole lot of weight on this photo specifically. However, the initial photo, the more vague photo, does seem to have some possibility of being her. Now, of course, we'll never know. No one's claimed the pictures, and of course, they've done all the same, forensic detection and whatnot to try and figure out who this person is. Now, I also want to go ahead and make a quick sidebar about these photos, but it was a statement that Calico's sister had made. This is her stepsister, mind you. And I want to include this because the family's opinions on the matter are important. So Calico's sister said, and went on record, and I'm going to read this verbatim, that they had a striking, uncalming resemblance, the photos. As for me, I will not rule them out, but keep in mind our family has had to identify many other photographs, and all but those three were ruled out. Those three being the initial photograph found at the convenience store, the vague photograph, and then in addition, the Amtrak photograph that was taken. So this kind of leads us to believe that out of the many photos that were potentially presented to them, these were the three that seemed most likely. So this does, in some way, shape, or form, beg the benefit of doubt that it seems unlikely that there would be potentially hundreds of photographs that were presented to them, potentially more, and that these would just somehow be the three that they would pick out. Now, obviously, there could be different reasonings for it, different rationales, but ultimately, we'll never know, unfortunately. With that being said, now we have to kind of get into what I would almost call a disturbing development that was made in 2008 by a sheriff named Rene Rivera. In 2008, Rene Rivera, the sheriff of Valencia County, reported that he had received information that two teenagers had supposedly accidentally struck Calico with their truck, panicked, and then subsequently killed her. Now, the next little bit of information I really want to emphasize because he made this statement to the public, and according to Rivera, the boys who knew Calico, so they were people who did know her, drove up behind her in their truck, and some form of accident ensued. Calico was then murdered by the accident, of course, and those responsible covered up the crime. Now, Rivera stated that he knew the names of the people involved, but that without a body, he could not open the case. He could not make a case, he could not make any convictions and or arrests, and for that purpose, did not want to provide the names of the people involved. Now, no evidence was ever provided from this conversation. And this is part of the reason why, when I read this, I wanted to make a video about it, because even if I can only get 100 people to watch this video, that's 100 people who potentially didn't know about Tara Calico, and this is absolutely fucking ridiculous. I don't mean this to be insensitive, but he says that he didn't want to release the names of people, even though he supposedly had proof that they did it or a confession, but because he couldn't find the body of Tara Calico, he didn't want to release any information. So Calico's stepfather, John Dole, I for some reason forget the names of his Tara's other relatives, but John Dole, Tara's stepfather, commented that Rivera should have said nothing. That unless he was willing to disclose the information or make some sort of conviction or arrest on, that he basically shouldn't have said anything, that by providing this information, it was simply just a false flag or a false hope. I would agree with that sentiment. I think that Rivera making this statement was either A, trying to draw attention away from a potentially hot lead, or perhaps, and obviously this is uber conspiracy related, maybe he had something to do with it. I'm not saying he did, but it just seems incredibly suspect. And again, this is not an accusation. I don't want to get sued, but I'm just saying that if you look at the case matter and you look at the fact that Rivera made this statement almost, I don't want to say randomly, but after he received some form of tip or whatever the case may be, Rivera made the comment, made the statement, no evidence was ever released, nothing was ever brought forth to prove his statement to be true, and they were also unwilling to provide any essentially backup for that, and said no questions essentially. So, yeah. That seems just a little bit suspicious, and I will maintain that thought until something else happens. So, keep that in mind. That was something I really wanted to touch on because it's insane. But outside of this, there have been more recent developments in this case that I feel like are very important to the matter. I do apologize for the interjection here, but I do have a little bit of more information that I think would be relevant to this story that I found while editing. I believe this information is actually related to the information that Rene Rivera actually disclosed to people in that little snippet that he did. And I believe that this is the same information that he was talking about. And the only reason I think that is because some of the details seem similar. But let me get into this real quick. You can see what you think. But this happened after the fact. So the Rene Rivera information was released in 2008 when he came and said that. However, in 2013, so 5 years later, a man named Henry Brown made a deathbed confession to the police. He stated that shortly after her disappearance, the disappearance of Tara Calico, he was in the basement of a man named Lawrence Romero Jr., and while he was in the basement, he actually noticed what appeared to be a young woman's body wrapped in a tarp and was buried in a makeshift grave. So what happened apparently was that Romero, a man named Dave Silva, and another man with red hair told Henry that the body was Tara's. They claimed that they, on the day she disappeared, that they were along the highway and they were with a person named Leroy Chavez. They were in the truck, they noticed her, they tried to get her attention, and subsequently struck her by accident. When they did that, they then abducted her, took her to a gravel pit, and unfortunately assaulted her. Tara then, of course, said that she was going to go to the police, in which case Romero stabbed her to death while Silva, Chavez, and the unknown third man held her down. They then hid her body in a bush, but once the searching started, they then had to move her to a more secure location and moved her into the basement where Henry then saw it. At the bequest of the people, Henry was threatened and was told that if he went to the police, he would be killed. He also stated that they got away with the crime because Romero's father, Lawrence Romero Sr., was the sheriff at the time and covered it up. The other families as well, of course, helped cover it up. And supposedly Tara's body was dumped in a nearby pond near one of their houses, and the bike was discarded at a junkyard. In addition to that, another man came forward at some juncture, stated that one of the suspects had confessed to him, and that Romero Jr. then committed suicide. In addition to that, since there's no body found, no charge could be filed. So I want to touch on a little bit that I'm not sure if this has anything to do with the Rene Rivera thing. I'm betting that there's probably not two people confessing to this or talking about the same exact thing. So I believe that this is accurate and it's a similar process to where, Rene Rivera had this information but potentially couldn't elaborate on it for some reason. I still think it's a little suspect, but it may make more sense that he couldn't talk about it if there was nothing to substantiate the information. So Henry, deathbed confessional, gave this information to police in 2013, and here we are. So we're going to move on to the rest of the video, but I appreciate your patience and appreciate the leeway here with information that I'm getting as I go. After Rivera's statement, there have been 3 significant updates that I've been able to find. There have been obviously other things that have happened within this case, but there are 3 things specifically that I think are important for people to know. In October 2013, a 6-person task force was established to reinvestigate Calico's disappearance. As of 2017, No arrests had been made. However, the case was continued to be open. They didn't close it. They didn't call it a cold case. They continued to investigate the case. And then in October of 2019, specifically October 1st, the FBI announced that they would be offering a reward of $20,000 for precise details leading to the identification or location of Tara Calico and information leading to the arrest and conviction of those responsible for her disappearance. So they reopened the case, and they also reestablished an award for this, which to me at least provides that there may have been some hope and or possibility of a new lead, which would come to fruition because in September of 2021, the Valencia County Sheriff's Office and the New Mexico State Police issued a statement that they have a new lead in the case and that there is a focus on a sealed warrant for an unknown private residence located within Valencia County that had been issued, but then no further details were provided. I couldn't find any additional updates since that September 2021 update. However, this to me means that they're still continuing to investigate this case and that there may be the possibility of some closure soon to this case. But it's important because they're still looking. They're still fighting the good fight and still trying to find Tara, whether that be alive or dead at this point. Now, of course, we know the statistics, and it's not likely that Tara has survived these years if she's remained in captivity. However, I do want to put up some information here. This is, I guess, Tara Calico's photo that's been aged up, how old she would be as of like 2018. So, of course, I don't know if she's still out there, but if somebody's seen her or seen someone who looks like her, then there's a possibility for that. And of course, here's the poster for this information. This has the information for the reward and everything else. And I'll, of course, link down below the FBI's information for this because, hell, if I can get somebody to look at these pictures or, I don't know, think about it, maybe something will come of it. I don't know. But this would be a great thing. I hope one day that maybe Netflix or somebody else will pick up because, quite frankly, I feel like this case is often overlooked. I've not heard anything about this case, and there are people that's still being, researched as early as as late as 2021, and I'd never heard of it before. Maybe that's my ignorance and not knowing anything about cold cases, but I feel like this is something that should be talked about more, in my opinion. So let's transition to final thoughts. That's all the information I have about the Tara Calico case, but let's go ahead and transition into final thoughts and talk about the rest of this. So I just want to really emphasize that this is still an active case, an open, active case with active leads. And I think this is important because when I was looking online, a lot of people have deemed this a cold case and have kind of stopped following it. And I understand why people may have done that, but it's really interesting that there's still casework and leads being worked on as early or as late as 2021. So I think it's really important that we continue to perpetuate this case and continue to push it forward, and hopefully we see some results in the future. It would be nice to have some sort of, closure for her family, somebody to say, hey, this is what happened. And all we've worked on so far are potential leads or potential thoughts or processes. And, we even had somebody who basically went as far to say that, we should stop looking because I know who did it, which I still maintain that the sheriff's Rivera in 2008, his statement about this just seems incredibly suspect and almost out of nowhere. It seemed like it was unprompted that he would make the statement and provide no evidence or proof, but act as if this is the conclusion to that story. So that would be my thoughts and opinions on this case. I hope that there's still more to come. And if anything ever comes out of this in the future, if anybody has any additional updates or any information that I've left out, feel free to add in the comment section down below. I would love to see what you guys can gather. I basically tried to give a large overview of this. There's a lot of stuff that I couldn't include because there's so much stuff that if I included it, this video would be hours long. As it is right now, I think we're over the 20-minute mark, but not really sure until I go to edit this video later. But I think that if we continue to talk about it and we continue to make sure that people know that this is still an active case, maybe we'll get some traction online. Maybe people will continue talking about it. There is actually a website, I believe, for Tara Calico, as well as other people like on Reddit and stuff who are talking about this. So people are still talking about it. I'm not the only one by any means, but let's get more people to talk about it. Let's continue to talk about this case. Let's do it. I want to see results from this, man. I'm invested now, and I feel like this is a really interesting case, and there's a lot of really suspicious things that have just played into this that I just don't quite understand, and I feel like we need some answers to them. Who took these photographs? Are any of these photographs actually of Tara? Did Rivera have any part in this process? I felt like that conclusion that he brought to the table didn't make enough sense for him to bring to the table unless he had conclusive evidence. And if he did have conclusive evidence, why was nothing ever brought forward? Why did he basically just say, hey, I know who did it, dropped the mic, and walked away? It doesn't make sense. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. What are your thoughts about this? Check out my other video about a crime. It was Johnny Gosch. Johnny Gosch is another case that's similarly weird. Obviously, I don't think they have any connection by any means, but it's a similarly strange incident that had occurred, and I think it's also worth a watch, and it warrants additional investigation, at least as far as I concern it. But yeah, so we're going to end it off there. Again, like, subscribe, leave us a comment down below, open the dialogue, talk to people about this, tell your friends. But thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy, and we will see you in the next one. See ya.